Why do we collectively love social media train wrecks so much? If you engage in social media at all, you can probably name some instances where people went publicly crazy for a while. Maybe somebody claimed that being able to chop a tomato is elitist, or something insane like that. But why does this happen? I'm joined today by Rebecca Jennings, who's a senior correspondent at Vox, where she covers social media platforms, influencers, and the online internet attention economy. In this episode, we recap some of the funniest Chronically online episodes that we've ever seen and talk about what makes them so hilarious. We also talk more seriously about why it is that normal posting gets almost no attention, but insane posts go viral. Whether or not humans have always been like this. Whether or not it's bad for society that we have these viral outrage mechanisms capturing so much of our attention, and a lot more. As always, if you want to support the show, you can do so at patreon.com/Neoliberal Podcast. Supporters get access to bonus episodes, merch, and other cool perks. You can become a member of the Center for New Liberalism at cnliberalism.org/become a member. Thank you for your support, and enjoy the episode. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Neoliberal Podcast, part of the Center for New Liberalism. I'm your host, Jeremiah Johnson, and joining me today is Rebecca Jennings. Rebecca, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, so I think the first thing we have to start out with, at a very high level, as we're talking about the internet and viral trends and all the things that we can't look away from, why do we love a train wreck so much on the internet? This is like an inherent part of being human almost. Why do we love these kind of car crash level posts and tweets and things like that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think on a very high level, I think what it really does is showcases the vastness of the human experience. You know, like who knew that there were people out here that could get mad at such a tiny thing or get offended by, you know, something very, you know, inconsequential to their life and to everyone's lives. So I think that's kind of a nice way of putting it. But I think otherwise, I mean, I think we're, as a society, a little bit addicted to outrage. And these are really, really fun things to get mad about and feel like we are contributing to something that we feel like is progressive and morally just when it is meaningless and stupid.
Yeah, there's a political scientist I really like named Eitan Hersh. She wrote a book called Politics is for Power. We've talked about it on this show a bunch, but basically his theory is that people engage in what he calls like political hobbyism, that rather than do the hard work of like, I'm going to go out and knock on doors and canvass, I'm going to, you know, actually call my representative, I'm going to show up at a town hall meeting.
Yeah.
That a lot of people's engagement with politics is like, I want to post on social media.
Yeah.
I want to have the same engagement with politics that I do with the Real Housewives or with a sports team to make it like not gender coded. Like they essentially, you know, we watch the Real Housewives and we get real mad at certain characters.
Yep.
We watch our favorite sports team and we boo the team, the rivals that we hate, and we cheer the team that we like. And that's essentially how a lot of people treat like politics and social justice, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think like everything in the way like our media system is like operates and how we talk to each other online encourages that sort of, you know, passive consumption, you know, reactionary relationship to politics and social justice.
Was it always like this? Like, were we like this in the 60s? Or is this just a social media thing?
Well, I mean, one of my like core beliefs is that human beings are just going to do human things, and human beings like haven't really fundamentally changed ever in like the course of our species' existence. So it's like, yeah, if you put
that's a hot take. I feel like that could get ratioed on Twitter. But.
Oh, of course it could. Anything could. But I think that like if you like humans were never better in any other time period. We were just as evil. We just have like a lot more tools to, you know, weaponize that and appeal to our most base instincts right now. And like, yeah, you could drop social media in the 60s and it would look just like this.
I do wonder if social media, like if the tools have caused the way that we have cultural fights to be different, though. Because, like,
Yeah.
I think about the 60s, and I wonder just, like, is it the same dynamics of, like, oh, the gossip around the town is that, Shirley's sleeping with such and such. And,
Yeah.
I don't know, like, what Shirley seems like a very old name to me. That's why I did, like, the 60s. But, or, like, I don't know, I'm trying to think about, like, the standard, like, old-timey stuff, but just the local gossips, laughing at the town weirdo. But now it's kind of like on this global scale sometimes.
Exactly. And like, yeah, I guess when I say like human beings are always the same, it's just like, yes, if you put like, 1,000 bajillion millions of people on the same platform, like it's going to be insane. Like in normal life, we have the natural gatekeepers of time and space, and on the internet that doesn't exist, or I mean, it barely exists. So it's like we were never meant to have these kind of conversations with like a bunch of strangers who are essentially just like a mass of anonymous weirdos. That this is not how human beings were like built to operate.
What's the number that they say, like Dunbar's number? Like you can only have like 150 people that you actually know, or something like that. Yeah,
because otherwise you're like no one is meant to do that. And so that's why we call these conversations like chronically online or terminally online, because they just don't happen like this in real life.
Rebecca, I'm sorry to inform you, but chronically online is what do you? I can't even say it with a straight face. It's like appropriating, like disabled illness? People. Yeah, chronic illness, sure. Yeah. Terminal illness. You're actually going to get canceled for that.
I've been canceled enough. It's fine. I welcome it.
Let's get into specifics, though. We're talking about like very hypothetical dog piles.
Yeah.
You had a great viral tweet the other day, viral for the good reason, I guess. If any viral thing can ever be good, that asked like, what was your favorite chronically online discourse this year?
Yep.
And it just had some of the most incredible stuff.
Oh yeah, it was magic. So I tweeted that because I had done the same thing 2 years ago. I think 2020 was a real watershed moment for chronically online discourse because more people were online. So I did that year, and I got a lot of really good ones, and so I did it again. And right away there were the standouts. There was Chilly Neighbor, which I'm sure we'll talk about at some point. But the one that kind of like a lot of people posted about was this a couple of months ago. This woman like posts about her morning routine, which is like every morning I wake up and
coffee
I have coffee.
Wife.
Yeah,
I remember coffee
garden
wife.
Yeah. And she's like, every morning I have coffee with my husband in our garden and we just talk for hours. I love him so much, which is like, whatever. She's like humble bragging. Sure. That's fine. But immediately people are like, must be nice, bitch. I could not like not everyone has a garden or a husband or, time. Like you must be so rich. She's just like, no, like actually I'm a yoga teacher and he just like does YouTube or whatever. And I'm like, okay, like, but obviously it turns into, it goes from being something that's like, okay, like that's great that she had a nice morning. But of course it turns into going from like, okay, that's a little bit annoying or braggy or whatever, to you are actively enacting violence against me personally.
Everything is violence.
Everything is violence, yes.
Weirdly accept violence sometimes. Sometimes violence is not violence. But no, there's this weird cycle that some of these things go through. And like there's different kinds of these like discourses.
Yeah.
But one kind is definitely somebody posts something very normal, like I like to have coffee with my husband in the morning.
Yeah.
Or there's some young men across the street. Maybe it would be nice to make chili for them, yeah. Which it turns out is genocide. But something normal is posted, an insane reaction takes place.
Yep.
And because of the way our brains work, we like to just jump on things. So we see somebody getting like righteously angry. And then a lot of people just without thinking start to agree with it because it uses the right, like,
yes.
I hate to be like overly political. This is a political podcast, but I still don't like to be political sometimes, but like there's these like progressive shibboleths,
yeah, and
turns of phrase. And if you use the right turn of phrase, sometimes people's brains will just turn off and assume you must be correct.
Exactly.
Like you are destroying my lived experience as a disabled person and an autistic person or whatever the case may be. And not to like make fun of those communities, but
right.
like, giving chili to your neighbor is not what's going to be the death knell of those communities. And
right.
so there's this insane reaction to it. And then almost after that, there's like the regular people then see the insane reaction, and they react to the reaction, and you enter this cycle. And I think that's what we call the discourse.
Yes.
Is once you're in that react to the reaction kind of.
Right. And I just want to say that, like, you know, it's really hard to talk about this kind of stuff without coming across as like a reactionary, like, wokeism gone too far. You know, it's like the PC police. You know, I'm not doing that. It's more about like sometimes when we see people like using the language of social justice to justify like these kind of like just really like it is a stretch to like say that, you know, coffee lady is violence. It sort of like weakens the actual, you know, the actual people, the work that, you know, people are doing to, you know, help like the fight against, you know, ableism and classism and racism and sexism, which like are very real things like that permeate every layer of our society. And so it's like it because like, you know, half the time things probably are ableist or sexist. It's just like we have to figure out where like the Overton window is of like what's acceptable to call out and what isn't, or what's acceptable to like use that kind of language to talk about and what isn't.
Do you have a personal favorite? We've talked about Coffee Wife. We've talked about Chili Neighbor. Are there any other ones that just like have a special place in your heart? And I'm thinking like the kind of thing where you're just washing dishes and then out of nowhere you think, oh yeah, that happened, and you start laughing.
Well,
like,
so the one that I literally think about probably, at least once a week, and this didn't happen this year, I think it was like a year or two ago, was when it's so horrible. I
see, you're already laughing. You already can't get through it. Whatever it is, it must be really good.
It's so good. So this woman, it's this horrible, horrible tragedy, but like it's so funny. Basically at Disney World a couple of years ago, there was this toddler, like a 2-year-old, was eaten by an alligator and died, which is so sad. But
it is very sad. We have to acknowledge,
yes,
though, if this happened like on 30 Rock or on a TV show, we would find it funny.
Of course.
We really would.
Of course. And so someone tweeted, like, you know, a week or a couple days after or something, they were just like, I'm so finished with white men's entitlement lately that I'm not really that sad about a 2-year-old being eaten by a gator because his daddy ignored signs. It's so good.
And some people's brains are just broken that way. Like there's different varieties. One of my other favorite normal thing happens, or I guess this isn't even normal. This is more like a second variety of this, I think, is I did an insane thing. Why doesn't everyone agree with me? And like there was like, to just give an example before my favorite one, there was a lady who posted a poll on Twitter that was like, it's like really like uncool and like not chill to like eat the bread as soon as it comes out at a restaurant, right? And it was, the poll was like 99% no and 1% yes. And then she like doubled down and she's like, y'all are some broke bitches if you're eating the bread as soon as it comes out. Like if you're so hungry, you should have had a pregame meal. A pregame meal to your meal.
That's so good.
It's you know, I have this insane view. Why is everyone mad at me? And my favorite instance of this ever, it wasn't this year, but it was Bean Dad.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember Bean Dad?
Of course.
The guy who was like, you know, my daughter wanted a snack and she got a can of baked beans and I realized she doesn't know how to open this. So I said, how do you think we should open this? And then he proceeds to not open it for her for 6 hours. And this poor little girl is trying to, like a 6-year-old girl, is trying to figure out how to operate a can opener. And like Twitter, of course, roasts him alive while he, you know, is trying to defend himself. And I think that's variety number 2 is I did something crazy. Why is everyone mad at me?
Yeah, and tweeted about it to my bajillions of followers. Yeah, those are the best. I especially love the one is from this year, and I think it was on your worst tweets bracket, but where the person was like, I need to explain to my teen child that it's that they're trauma dumping on me because I'm the only person in their life that they can talk to, and I just am sick of being like the dominant femme labor caregiver to like, because that contributes. Just like, yeah, like talking to your kid is sexism or something. It's really
I am sympathetic to women who say like they do more emotional labor than men, and like this is a problem we should fix in society. It shouldn't be that way. But then also, like, literally, you signed up to be this person's parent.
I know.
Like, you are supposed to be doing emotional labor for your child.
And it's also, like, not what emotional labor means. Like, that's just, like,
I don't know, man.
Being a parent. Anyway, yeah, it's a really good one.
So, So here's a question I have. I'm going to take it back into the theoretical. We can laugh about a bunch more of this because that's half of the purpose of doing this is just have something to laugh about. But have you ever read an essay called "The Toxoplasma of Rage"?
No, but it sounds cool.
Oh, it's such a good essay. So partially we think about this, and you wonder when people talk about ableism, things that don't go viral are things like, why is it so hard to get a ramp installed in a public building because I'm in a wheelchair?
Right.
That tweet will get like 12 likes and 2 sympathetic retweets.
Yeah.
If you post, criticizing incest is ableist because you're just saying that people with mental disabilities shouldn't exist, like that will go viral and people will make fun of you. And then some people will insist that you had a point actually. And that will get, an incredible amount of attention. And basically the question is, why is this? And this essay basically posits that we've built these systems where things that we agree on don't go viral.
Yeah.
Everybody agrees that, certain things are good, certain things are bad. But if you agree on it, it doesn't go viral. They give like an example of like, PETA, offering to pay people's water bills if they stop eating meat. And everybody gets mad at PETA for doing this, because PETA is an awful organization and it's clickbait and it's enraging and it even makes the vegans mad.
Yeah.
But then, the flip side of that is like, there's an organization that I think is really good called Mercy for Animals. Have you ever heard of Mercy for Animals?
Nope.
Have you heard of PETA?
Yes.
There you go. And
Right.
So there's this kind of cycle by which like, and it compares it to like the toxoplasma, like, it's literally like a disease that cycles between like cats and then it infects a bug and then the bug gets on, like, I don't know, it's some complicated life cycle. But basically these ideas of we just enrage each other over and over. And the reason things are dominated by horrible stuff is that if we agree on it, it doesn't go viral.
Right, exactly. I think that's what's happening here. It's like when we talk about chronically online discourse, it's not just like what people online are talking about. It's the sort of like knowing trollish responses that can only come from someone who has spent way too much time in the trenches of the discourse. So like someone who can look at a post like Garden Lady and say, this is violence, like that, because to someone out there's mind that there's a logical line of thinking that connects those two things. And it's a delight.
What's that? That there's it was in your article that you wrote about this. There's some tweet like, this post you wrote in 3 seconds is not indicative of my entire lived experience, and this is violence to me, the main character of the universe.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like,
right.
I don't know. Should we expect things to be sensitive to us in all circumstances? Like, I think it's a good thing that in modern society, we're generally more sensitive to people. We generally try not to say like sexist or homophobic stuff as much as we used to in the 90s. And this is something I've like learned as a millennial. When I was growing up as a teenager, everybody called things gay. You know, if something was stupid, it was gay. And I did that a bunch because I was a 13-year-old in like the year 2000. It's kind of just what you did. And then we got better. And now nobody does that anymore. And I don't do that. And so I think like, okay, it's good that we're sensitive, but should we be that sensitive to like some of these like weird complaints? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the answer is no, we shouldn't be, because like these are not people who like really have any bearing on our own reality or the actual reality. Because like when you think about someone who,
I guess another level, just to interrupt real quick.
Yeah.
Should we even take these people seriously? Like, are they being serious, or are they some kind of troll?
I think that a lot of people are like, trying to be serious and trying to engage in good faith. It's just that like their opinions are so, unreasonable, I think, in so many ways. And I think like most reasonable people would agree with that. It's like that they ultimately like don't really matter. And like obviously they matter as people, but like, writers or posters like weren't meant to like have this much real-time feedback from every single person in the world. Like there just aren't that many people out there who would look at, something and get like super, super outraged about it but the reason why we see them is because of platforms like Twitter, where it's like, it's a big equalizer. Everyone can see everyone's replies. And you are faced with people who can logically like believe these kind of insane things, and they seem much more, powerful or meaningful than they actually are. Because like, I don't know, like I always try to think about, who is the person that's tweeting angrily like about like some imagined instance of like, whatever, classism, ableism. And it's probably someone who like spends probably like a lot of time online, someone who's probably maybe like kind of lonely, someone who's maybe not in like a great headspace. And so it's just like, yeah, that's one person out there. But to everyone else, that's like, it's open season on that person. It's fresh meat. We can all like, we can all have fun railing against that person. And it's just like kind of icky from all sides. It's just like weird and bad.
I actually want to ask a question about that. You led me into it perfectly when you say it's icky and weird and bad to like dogpile on people this way. And especially when they've got these bizarre opinions. And I think there pretty clearly are some negative impacts on like this toxoplasma of rage theory that only the most divisive things go viral. Not even just the worst, but the most divisive.
Yeah.
Because if everybody agrees on something, it doesn't get as much attention. Right. If people are really divided on it, it's going to turn into a huge cultural fight. Yeah. One of the examples from that article, this is from a few years back, so they talk about Black Lives Matter, and this is pre-George Floyd. This goes all the way back to Ferguson. Mm-hmm. And they talk about how, do you remember the Eric Garner case?
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is getting into a lot more serious stuff than like Coffee Wife. Yeah. But Eric Garner was almost universally agreed when he died that this was a horrible, horrible thing. The police were just amazingly in the wrong. You had Bill O'Reilly, going on Fox News and saying, I can't understand the police here. There's got to be an investigation. Mainstream conservative culture was like pretty much united.
Yeah.
But Eric Garner also got about 3% of the attention that the Michael Brown case in Ferguson did. Mm-hmm. Precisely because the Michael Brown case had a lot more like qualifying statements that would let people fight about it.
Right.
And that Michael Brown had probably just robbed a store, I think, or and that it was unclear what actually happened in the interaction, and so it turned into this giant culture war fight in a way that people would agree the police acted terribly in the other case, but it was boring to talk about that.
Right.
And so my question is like, is this just a fundamentally bad thing, both in the silly internet way and then kind of like in a serious societal way, that we gravitate on some of these things that are so controversial so much?
Yeah, I mean, I think in an attention economy, it's like there's more to extract. There's more discourse to extract when there's more complicating factors, like in the Michael Brown case. Like he wasn't.
I do love that you say extract, by the way. Like we're working in the hot take mines,
No, literally, we are. Like there's more there to kind of raise counter arguments with, whereas I think like a conversation about Eric Garner is probably a pretty short one. It's like, this was really bad. Whereas I think a lot of people saw Michael Brown as like an imperfect victim. Whereas with the Eric Garner case, it was like, no, we can all agree that this was bad. But I think if you're looking at it from like a bad faith angle, you can kind of hem and haw and be like, actually, the police aren't killing Black people. It's like you can use that as an example to further your own like weird end goals.
This is something where I think actually society has changed quite a lot since the 50s and 60s, because back then I think you had a greater ability to actually choose your fights. Like if you're an activist who wants to change the world, there was a Rosa Parks before Rosa Parks. Mm-hmm. And I actually, it's terrible. I probably should have looked her name up, but I don't even remember her name. And that tells you something. Mm-hmm. But I know that the story was she was also arrested for sitting in the front of a bus that was segregated, but she was an unwed teen mother. Mm-hmm. And Rosa Parks was a very respectable lady who was unimpeachable character. And so basically the first one happened like well before Rosa Parks, and they just decided not to do anything with it. They decided not to fight it. And because social media dynamics didn't exist back then, they could kind of choose to keep that one quiet. And then when Rosa Parks got arrested, they chose to explode it. Mm-hmm. Because Rosa Parks, they knew was going to be like a good, just face of this cause. Whereas today, I don't think you even have that option. Today, the more controversial one that has more kind of like qualifying little bits to it that's what's going to go viral every time.
Oh, absolutely. I completely agree.
With all of this, I think that leads to a question. If social media is a negative in some ways, not in every single way, it does good things, but it has negative dynamics to it. Are you a bad person if you find all of this hilarious and you love the discourse, you love when things go viral, you think it's amazing? I am like this. Does it make me a bad person?
Of course not.
And if you want to tell me I'm a bad person, it's fine.
No. I think I think there's like a very human instinct to find this stuff kind of ridiculous and bizarre and just like, it's voyeurism. It's type of guy syndrome, which is something that I wrote in the story. A lot of our entertainment comes from like thinking up a certain type of guy that does or does not exist, but probably somewhere out there exists. As you create this kind of like straw man to represent a certain kind of person that you dislike and then project it into like whoever's on Twitter that day. Like,
I hate that I think this way, but there's a famous tweet, and I hate it. This is almost talking about the subject that we're talking about, but half of the way I think now is like Rebecca's making a point, and I'm thinking, oh, this reminds me of that tweet. But there's a tweet that's like, Twitter is 90% making up a guy and then getting really mad at him.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. And I think I don't think anyone is a bad person for that, because this is our form of entertainment, and it's a very human thing to do, is like, whoa, you view the world that way? That's kind of crazy. Like, but there's some beauty in that as well. Like, look at the vastness of the human experience. But ultimately, no, I think like I did start to feel a little bit ickier after like when I posted that thread, it went like super viral, and then there were people being like, all this stuff, like when people talk about, quote unquote chronically online discourse, it's just like more socially sanctioned ways to talk, like to make fun of people that are disabled. And I'm like, I really, really don't want to be contributing to that. Like, that's not at all what I think of when I think of chronically online. I think of it more as like, you didn't account for my personal experience versus like all disabled people are wackos on the internet, because that's not, I don't believe that. And I don't think that's true, but that's.
Well, and I mean, I think it presupposes that like, the best way to fight ableism, for instance, which ableism is a real thing, is to do these bizarre things on the internet and to never call them out. And calling them out is harmful to disabled people. But I don't think that's true. And look, like I'll use a political example to get away from ableism. And I am not a leftist. This is the Neoliberal Podcast. We have a point of view. So making fun of communists is always something I'm glad to do. But in my bracket, there was a first round matchup in the worst tweets bracket, where one person was saying, if you're a communist and you still eat out at restaurants, like, check yourself, like, this shit isn't cool, you better stop, like, restaurants are problematic. And then directly opposite that, you could either vote for that one, or you could vote for the person that says, look, home cooking is problematically gendered. It is, NIMBY aligned. It is a waste of communal resources. The revolution, comrade, will not be cooked at home. It will be served to you in a restaurant. And so it's like, if you're an actual communist, I am not, but let's say that you are somebody who wants to promote leftism and communism. Is that actually benefiting your cause at all, to have these people out there arguing that all forms of food are problematic? And and maybe look, historically, communism the answer has been we all just starve. But go talk to somebody who lived in the Soviet Union. But is that actually helping your cause? I don't think so.
Yeah.
And so when I think about like these people accusing you of like you're actually harming disabled people, I'd be like, look, do you think that these people who are posting this nonsense, are they the ones helping disabled people? Because I don't think they are.
Yeah, no, and that's kind of like my point. I don't think they are either, but it's like, and in a normal world, like in a normal society, people who have these very extreme takeaways on, like an innocuous tweet, they would be sort of like shunted to the side. Like, you can't have the most extreme take and be the center of attention. But online, where we're kind of rewarded for engaging with the most, extreme takes, that's what gets attention. And so we're forced to like normalize these very extreme views. And I think obviously we can talk about like polarization all day, but it's like it's happening in these micro levels too, where it's like we're having this normal discussion or what's trying to be a normal discussion. Some random person has a really extreme take, then all of a sudden everyone's like, what the fuck? Like, that's like the most chronically online discourse ever. And then it just like repeats itself because that's bringing more attention to the extreme take and making people more outraged that those people even exist. And yeah, it's a cycle.
So one of the things that I think about when I think about this, I think you probably got a lot of this as well in your replies. When I posted my the worst tweets bracket, there's a lot of people saying, I love this, it's the best thing ever. And then there's a lot of people saying, I hate that I know what 80% of these are. And so I have a question about that, about the people who enjoy this kind of stuff. There's this love-hate dynamic.
Yeah.
Do we actually hate it, or do we just kind of say that we hate it when we secretly love it?
I think there's a lot of that. I think we secretly do love it because I think we can talk openly about like, you know, Chili discourse was pretty fucking funny. Like, you know, there is obviously an element of like, oh, it's really fun when Twitter has a main character and we can all kind of make fun
What
of
is it
them.
like? Twitter has a main character every day, and your goal is to never be the main character.
Correct. Yes.
I feel like you were the main character for a day. Like, what was that? Was that okay? Did you survive that?
Yeah, I did. It was not like I muted it right away. As soon as it started getting like, you know, even like faves into the hundreds, I was like, I can see where this is going. And I muted it. And then when I looked back later, there were people that angrily replied to my tweet saying that I muted it because they're like, wow, I can't believe like you just like tweeted something like this and then left. Like you are obligated to see how angry people are with you. And I'm like, I'm really not. Like, I really am not obligated to do anything.
Bitch, I don't know anything to you.
Yeah, like, who are you?
Oh man,
Yeah.
no, it's I'm not sure how to think about this because, like, one of the things I wonder is that, you know, so many people say they hate this, and I don't even know how to phrase this, but they're like, social media is terrible, I hate it, I'm getting off of it, we should all spend less time on it. But I wonder how much they really mean that, because it is typically the people who post the most who are most likely to tweet about how they need to get off social media. And
Yes.
I think we're all just addicted to it. And like myself, I think it's actually like lovely, and I get a lot of joy out of it. I read your thread for hours and I cackled like a madman. Like it brought genuine happiness to me to go read somebody talk about how, you know, the Chile neighbor was genocide to autistic people or something, like, which again, everything is genocide now apparently, but like, I don't know, I get a lot of things about this. I'm the person who's like, no, all of this is great, like none of it's problematic, I think you're all amazing, I hope you all never stop posting.
Yeah, oh my god.
But I don't know, like, should people post less? And when they say that, do you believe them that they want to post less?
Well, I think like it's funny because I totally agree. The people who call Twitter like a hell site, I'm like, you are always on Twitter. Like, for someone who proclaims that it is like,
oh, I call it the hell site, but I love the hell site. I love that it is the way it is.
Right. Yeah. I get that there is obviously a like, you know, there's an endearing hellishness to Twitter that is really hard to step away from or imagine life without, I think, for a lot of people that have spent a lot of time there. But yeah, I think like, yeah, if you want to log off. I think if I ever, like, the thing that would really make me log off if I became like extremely, extremely wealthy, then I would be like, goodbye. Like, I can pay for better entertainment than this.
Is this free advice for Elon Musk?
Yes, it absolutely is. Although I do appreciate that now, you know, now that everyone can see what a douchebag idiot he is, like, you know, we're all, Twitter is kind of helping us as a society realize that, like, hey, maybe this man shouldn't be the richest man in the world. Like, maybe
the worst thing is that he's not even very good at posting. Like,
I know.
He just copies other people's memes, and it's like phrases from like 10 years ago, you know, my pronouns are prosecute Fauci.
Right. Yeah.
It's like
and
such a
like,
weird, like, it's not even that it's a bigoted joke, which, okay, it is that it's a bigoted joke. I don't want to pass that over.
Right.
It's also just that it's lame. It's not funny.
Oh, I know. It's like latte liberals. It's like, are we still talking about like lattes and Democrats? Like, is this the 1990s? But Yeah, at the same time, it's like, at least Trump, like, had creativity. Like, his tweets were funny.
Trump, for better or worse, was an amazing poster.
An amazing poster.
Like that thing he would post about Diet Coke where he's like, the Coca-Cola company is angry at me. It's all right. I'll keep drinking that garbage.
Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah, there is no charm with Elon Musk's Twitter. And so, yeah, I'm glad that we as a society are all watching that happen in real time.
Part of me wonders, is this just an internet-only thing? Because all the things we're talking about have been like real chronically online.
Mm-hmm.
They have no connection to the real world whatsoever. And by that, I mean like wider culture.
Yeah.
But there's also versions of this that are like, if you go into like a Real Housewives fandom, and again, this is on Twitter, but it's other places, but it's like they have their own drama that I've never heard of,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like it's related to the show. Or, you know, people who are Taylor Swift fans, you know, have their own drama going on. K-pop people are constantly fighting with each other, and it's incomprehensible to me. You know, sports leagues, you know, NBA Twitter will, you know, have beef with a certain player. All of these things are like related to things that are not just like Coffee Wife or Bean Dad or just
Yeah.
just truly the most random nonsense you've ever seen. Part of me wonders if we're doing this for everything, if we do it for our politics and our sports leagues and our cultural fights and our music, is it just part of what it means to be human that we're always going to fight about dumb shit, no matter what the subject is? Like, you can get a bunch of Taylor Swift fans in the room and put them on Twitter, and as long as there's a couple hundred of them, they will have fights.
Oh, yeah. And like, I actually learned, like, embarrassingly, I learned about this concept literally yesterday, but it's reflective of Freud's idea of the narcissism of small differences, which I assume you've probably heard of. But it really, I was like, oh, yeah, that's such a thing. It's like, it's why, you know, progressives tend to, you know, often shirk our shared goals in favor of, you know, really, really fixating on these small, ultimately not as meaningful differences between factions. And I think my favorite example of this is this like invented feud between millennials and Gen Z. Like, no one is mad at like people who are like 5 years younger than them for being 5 years younger than them. You know, like it's not real. But because we're like close in age and we're both like fucked over by the systems that we've grown up with, we have decided to like, instead of kind of realizing how much we have in common and how, you know, together we can change the world, whatever, like we're latching on to this fake idea that like somehow there's this line in the sand where like, oh, if you were born in 96, you're like this way. And then if you're born in 92, you're this other way. Like this isn't a real thing, but it allows us to like feel, you know, unique, even though we're all kind of the same.
Yeah, it's kind of like, you know, if you are an Irish Catholic in the 90s, the person that you hate is not like somebody from
Yep.
Peru. It's like an Irish Protestant who lives two blocks down the street. You know, if you're, you know, someone
Exactly.
from the former Yugoslav Republic and any other ethnic group from the former Yugoslav Republic, like that's where the hatred is. It's not, you know, some guy in Africa. It's people who are near you,
Right.
who you disagree with somewhat.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, instead of, you know, the Northern Ireland Protestants and the Northern Irish Catholics.
I mean, is it if we go pop culture, is this like Katy Perry fans and Taylor Swift fans or something?
No, they made up. It's fine.
Oh, they made.
I mean,
for a while. Although I'm sure they would get very angry at me at insisting like Taylor and Katy are not the same. You know, they are very different. Their musical oeuvres are.
Yeah, totally.
So just as an aside, you had the viral tweet recently, and that was viral for a good way. It was very funny. Have you ever been like canceled? Have you ever been ratioed so much that you were like, man, I need to delete that. This is terrible. Have you ever gone viral in the bad way?
I've been like in general pretty lucky. Like I've never really gotten like super, super intense hate. Except for, yeah, this one time I definitely I tweeted something about how like I really hate this kind of tone that was at one point really prevalent on Twitter, where it was like, drink your water, like we love you. And it's like, it just comes off as very insincere to me. And I just don't like being treated like like a baby, like by strangers. But a lot of people were saying that that was ableist because a lot of disabled people use those reminders on Twitter to like feed themselves.
Oh,
I'm
Lord.
like, there's got to be a better way. Like,
Oh no.
I know.
No.
So
no,
that
no,
was the whole
no.
thing. And then I responded. I was like, hey guys, like, I'm really sorry. I never, like, I have ADHD. I'm really not trying to make fun of anybody that may need these kind of reminders. And because I use the term people with disabilities instead of disabled people, they were like, wow, you just made it so much worse. I'm like, I'm just
Oh,
like, oh
come
my God,
on.
I know.
Come on.
But the worst one was actually, I wrote this story that, in hindsight, we should not have put that headline on it, but it was for Racked, which is no longer exists. It was a fashion website. But I had this really cool interview with professor. She was a media studies professor, and she studied comic books, and feminism in comic books, it was really cool. And she
what could go wrong talking about feminism and comic book fans?
Yeah, exactly. I should have fucking known. I'm an idiot. But she said that so much of comic book art portrays women in these extremely like hypersexualized ways is because a lot of the art is inspired by porn, really, or artistic or like porny illustrations, porny cartoons. And she had all this like really insightful stuff to say, and how like the reason why a lot of female comic book characters always have like their hair down and like big boobs out. It's like that's because like they're kind of stemming from these like porny illustrations or trying to just like look as visually captivating as possible. And so the headline we went with was why superheroes don't wear ponytails and like why it's sexist or something. Because like, yeah, it is sexist, but it's not like the number one issue in feminism. But yeah, I like it just like got super picked up on like the right wing internet and YouTube sphere. And I actually got asked to go on this cable channel that I didn't know it existed. And I wish I hadn't. The NRA has its own cable show.
No way.
Yeah, and I was asked to like go on to debate Dana Lower or whatever, like the president of the NRA, and I was like, "Fuck off!" Like, you think
that seems like a core mission of the National Rifle Association is debating feminist comic books and ponytails.
Oh yeah, and it's like, yeah, I'm not gonna go like offer myself up to people that own guns. Like, that's not.
Well, and it's funny. The first thing that goes into my mind is, look, let's say you love guns and you're a woman. If you're going to the shooting range, the first thing you probably do is put your hair up in a ponytail.
Exactly.
Who's going to the shooting range with like full flowing locks down over their shoulders, just kind of messily, artfully like placed over their I don't know. Like, yeah. That seems like it's what you do.
Right, exactly. And like, again, like it was a good piece, but it was a silly headline. But yeah, this guy made a YouTube video of him reading every single line and picking it apart. Like this guy who like looked like a pile of.
Oh, you've had that happen to you.
Yeah,
that's the fun one. I've had that one.
Oh, what was yours?
Oh, God, I can't even remember. But it's happened a couple times because and look, I invite this and I'm fine with it because I run a Twitter account called Neoliberal. So to some extent, I have invited the internet to hate me. And I have to be okay with that. I know what I'm getting into. But I'm trying to think with the worst, the Neoliberal account gets people shitting on it all day. But we also have like a tribe of people who defend us because that's actual like tribal political warfare. There's the globes and the rose emojis. They fight each other. It's fine. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think personally. I think the only time I've ever been like ratioed and canceled was I tweeted something that I didn't think it was a great idea to keep the eviction moratorium going forever. This was like we're coming out, and I know how it sounds. People are probably canceling me now, but I know how it sounds. But this was like late into the pandemic. We're coming out of the It's not really pandemic world anymore, and it was like the third or fourth time they had done the eviction moratorium. And I was like, yeah, like it can't last forever. We can't have a reality where just nobody ever gets evicted ever again. And people decided it was terrible. And maybe I phrased it badly as well. Maybe I was not as empathetic in my language as I should have been. But they ended up not doing it, and then evictions didn't rise. So I felt justified. So.
There you go.
But No, and with me it's more politics.
Yeah.
With you it sounds more like
pop culture.
The cultural stuff,
Yeah.
which like again it's like it seems like this happens in so much. I mentioned all these other things, but I think about like what's a big one? Like the Johnny Depp Amber Heard thing.
Yeah.
You get a cultural happening of something goes on in pop culture, a movie star or a comic book or a singer or whatever, but then it leaves the realm of just I'm talking about this because I'm a Johnny Depp fan, or I'm talking about this because I'm a comic book fan or a Taylor Swift fan, and it becomes a item of broader cultural significance where like Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard is now like a feminist versus anti-woke people, or like it's like our culture war swallows everything eventually.
Yeah, it's inescapable. It feels really gross that you can't really talk about anything now without feeling like you're siding with a side on the culture war, especially when like something such as, Amber Heard and Johnny Depp comes along where it really, oh God, I don't even want to talk about that case because it'll just like make me angry. But like the way that people just
we're gonna start talking about our trauma from cultural episodes, right?
Right. Yeah. Oh my God. But again, like it's why it's so hard to talk about even this stuff, like complaining about chronically online discourse without sounding like this like wokeism gone too far, reactionary, like right wing nut job. Like it's really hard to talk about the gray area between the culture war stuff, and that's not the way it should be, because like there really shouldn't be culture wars at all, like because these things like are things that are made out to be so important, like these important markers of identity, but ultimately have no material.
Yeah, I mean, it happens everywhere. The Toxoplasma of Rage essay, which I'm going to link it in the show notes for anybody who wants to read it. I'll send it to you too if you haven't seen it. But it ends with like this dire prediction that everything is going to eventually get subsumed by this sort of dynamic, that eventually everything is going to fall prey to only the most controversial stuff gets attention. And it gives the example of, again, this was hot in 2014 when I think this was written. Video games, in 2010, nobody would say like, what we hate each other for? Video games. But then like the Gamergate saga happened and it exploded, and the video game community tore itself apart with accusations of sexism and racism and, wokeism and all this stuff. And then it is like now video games are a part of a culture war, even for the people who just want to sit down and fucking play a Kirby game or a Mario game. Like you can't do that anymore. Mm-hmm. And what's really funny is, as a dire prediction, he was like, "What's next? Bird watching?" And then I think like a year later, do you remember? Remember? It's the Central Park birdwatch lady who called the cops on some black bird watcher, and it turned into, "Is bird watching racist?" Which, like, what an absurd, like, that's, on some level, that's just an absurd question to even have to ask. Like, is bird watching racist? Right. And yet it became a whole fight.
Right. Yeah, literally because, like, culture war swallows everything, and it's impossible to talk about things without getting, like, wrapped up in it, no matter, like, whether you're trying to or not. Like, I don't know. It's a bummer.
All right, so we've got a little bit of time left. I think we should try to like end on some positive note. This is a bummer. Let's talk about something that's a little bit more fun.
Yeah.
Do you have anyone that you're cheering for in the worst tweet of the year bracket? Is there anybody that you want to see go like all the way?
I do like literacy is ableist. And I think like the one I'm rooting for is the guy who's like, actually I can't participate in the Kellogg's strike.
This would require a whole explanation, right?
Yeah, so like Kellogg's workers were on strike, and people were asking people like, don't cross the picket line, like don't buy Kellogg's cereal or whatever. Someone is like, hi, someone with sensory food issues here.
Also, can we talk about that, just the language of the hi such and such here, like that? Oh my God,
it's so grating. But they're like, I actually can only eat frosted mini wheats.
Because I have sensory issues.
But it's like you didn't have to tweet that. All you had to do was keep like secretly eating your fucking frosted mini wheats, and no one would know or care.
And it closes with another piece of language that again is just like where he's like, telling me not to cross the picket line is ableist as fuck, but y'all aren't ready for that conversation.
It's like, no, you're correct. We're not ready for that conversation because it's stupid.
Oh man. So one that I think I underseeded this one. I think it's only an 11 seed, which is probably a travesty. I think it was Anne Frank Has White Privilege, where it's some guy and he says, hold up, I want to make sure I say this correctly. Yeah, Anne Frank had white privilege. Yeah, she still got murdered. You know, people who get murdered can have white privilege too.
Oh my God.
I'm like, oh, like, I'm really glad that you put like this person, and this wasn't even in response to someone else talking about Anne Frank. This was not part of some other discourse. This was like out of nowhere. And I'm like, this person woke up and decided, you know what the internet needs to know today? You know what? Injustice has to be righted, and that I'm going to do it. We've got to talk about how Anne Frank had it too good for too long.
That's so good. That reminds me. Okay, so did you know that there was actually Anne Frank discourse 2 years ago when people said that someone, without talking about, without it was bi erasure if you didn't mention that Anne Frank may or may not have been bisexual.
Oh my God.
That's really good.
That's what's important to know about Anne Frank's personality, is that maybe one time she did like a Katy Perry I kissed a girl moment in her time. Like maybe. We're not even sure, to be like, okay, sure.
Oh man,
there's so much. I hope the Ukraine stuff goes far too, because the Ukraine takes were just truly deranged.
Did you have the stand my ground like a Ukrainian because I won't leave Twitter? Did you get that?
I did not. I don't even know what that is.
Oh my God.
What is that?
So that when like Elon Musk took over Twitter and like everyone was like, oh my God, this is the last day of Twitter. It's going to go away tomorrow. Someone wrote, we will not be silent. Stand your ground like a Ukrainian. I will never leave Twitter. It's really good.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So again, this is just main character syndrome.
Oh yeah.
Everybody thinks their day-to-day existence is what everybody else should focus on forever.
I know.
I will say the one that I hope wins. I don't think it'll win, but some guy on it's not even Twitter, it's LinkedIn. And it's not even like the craziest shit, but it's just the most bizarre. Was like, you know, Russia's invading Ukraine and we're invading the Amazon Sellers Conference, you know, duck and cover. And I'm like the LinkedIn people are not all right.
They're not all right.
They are. It is a whole different. That should be, actually. You wrote about this, didn't you? Like linked influencers.
Yes, I did.
Can I just ask, like, what the fuck is going on there? What did you learn writing about LinkedIn people?
So what I learned is that a lot of them are using ghostwriters because because LinkedIn is like suddenly just like a huge driver of like business deals or whatever. And a lot of people who are like,
who is the person who's like spending their time doing social media on like, I'm talking about the posters. I'm like, who reads LinkedIn and is like, I love the content here. Like,
no, I know. I mean, it's people trying to boost each other's content and boost like their own by doing so. And it's a lot of like, I learned that it was a lot of people in their sort of like later career where they're like, maybe they spent a lot of time at a corporate environment and now they want to like get more speaking engagements or write a book or be a kind of like business influencer in like, you know, to semi-retire, but not really. And so the way to do that is by like building up a LinkedIn profile and being like a go-to guy. And it's fascinating.
And I mean, I guess it's just the extension of everybody is a brand now. Everybody is
and look,
You and I live this because I have a podcast and you're like a writer, and it makes sense if you're a writer to some extent. You have a brand that's like what you write about. But like if you are a mid-level like account executive at Faceless Corporation,
right,
you don't really need a brand,
right?
You know, if you are the guy who just codes, you know, the algorithm on Twitter that tells the heart when to be read and when to not be read, like. Again, you don't need a brand. Like, not everything has to be a brand, but I don't know. I digress.
Right.
All right. So I think that's a good place to close the conversation. I could keep talking about, like, pointless internet bullshit forever, but I'll close with the final question that we ask everybody on this podcast. And that is, where should people go to learn more? If they're interested in what we're talking about, maybe some of these high-level ideas about the way social media interactions work and how people go viral and how people have discourse. If they want to learn more about this, where should they go? I will start out by linking your piece that you wrote recently in Vox. It's a great piece. We're going to put it in the show notes. Everybody go read it. But other than your own work, what would you recommend for people to just understand what's going on here?
So there's this essay that I kind of think about a lot when I talk about this kind of stuff, it's called Fuck Puritanism. It's by P.E. Moskowitz. And it's from their Substack, where they talk about how it's actually using like a Marxist framework to realize that, or to show that when people feel like their material powers kind of going away, they tend to cast themselves as like the moral arbiters of justice, and how like, and this kind of like call out culture, or whatever you want to call it, like, you know, that's morally wrong, like, etc. They kind of cling to those things to feel as though they are a good person. They cling to like their goodness and moral superiority because they are losing the other kinds of, or they don't have other kinds of power. And it's a really great essay, and I think everyone should read it.
All right. Well, my guest today has been Rebecca Jennings. I hope that everybody goes out and has as much discourse as possible. Please never stop posting. We love it too much. Rebecca, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much forever. I too love posting, and please never stop.